and the other thing is if you've been using the recordings, the cord from my microphone doesn't really work very well, so I'm just using my internal microphone on my computer, and I'm sure it's not as good. So it's already, the quality is questionable, but that's the way it is. They don't give me a microphone. They don't pay me for a microphone, so that's what you're getting. You can take it up with the university. Okay. So we're going to continue our conversation from last week about tool use, and then we're going to talk about concepts and categories in the second half. All right. Okay, so last week we kind of ended on this question. How would you define tool use? It's actually one of the more tricky concepts to define in animal cognition. And I left you with a couple of definitions. Your textbook has a couple of definitions. The most famous one is from Jane Goodall. But I kind of want to ask you guys, do you think there's anything very specific that you need in a definition of tool use? Opening it up. Yeah.
Intent to actually use it as a tool.
Intent to use something as a tool. I like that. Yeah.
Would you ever say something like other than their body?
Right, something external to the body. An object external to the body. Yes.
It has to serve a benefit or a function.
Absolutely. A benefit or a function. It can't just be random manipulation. These are great. Anyone else? Those are all really good points about defining tool use. So what we're going to do now is we're going to actually just watch a few different videos. There's quite a few, I think 4 or so. They're all short, of different behaviors that have been described as tool use in animals. And one of these videos was actually submitted by one of you guys, and I saved it for this unit. So that's great. So let's watch some videos of some animals using tools by some definitions and maybe not by other definitions. Okay. So let's take a look at that. Starting with cockatoos. Got a little stick. That was inside a straw. Very nice. For a delicious cashew treat. So they're breaking open the straw, right, to get the little... So there's lots of experiments in birds that kind of look similar to this, right? Okay. Now here's another example you might not think of immediately with leafcutter ants. Oops. What's happening? Oh, what's happening? But it's just not. Sorry, guys. Okay.
It's a leaf cutter ant. And no leaf in the canopy is too big for its sawtooth mandibles. It's not just leaves, of course. With their jaws vibrating 1,000 times per second, leaf cutter ants will happily slice, dice, and julienne flowers as well. If it grows and can be carried back to the nest, it's fair game. And as you can see, size is no object to these micro muscles. Their job is to strip the tree and cart it back to the nest. And they do this with lightning efficiency. The path back to the nest becomes a veritable ant superhighway, and woe be any insect getting away with these infinitesimal pieces of dirt. This forager brood takes all the foliage back to the nest, and then heads out for another payload. Once inside, caretaker ants stir the leaves into a garden of fungus, which becomes ant food. But leafcutter ants aren't the only ones feasting on the abundance. In the upper reaches of this tropical rainforest, there's plenty left for everyone. If you're any kind of insect, the world is your salad bar. No matter how many friends show up, Mother Nature always seems to provide enough foliage for every species.
Alright, I can't listen to that guy's voice anymore. I don't know why he has to talk like that. But basically, here, the ants are bringing leaves back to grow fungus on them, right? Is that tool use? By some definitions, it might be. I'll show this. Large. Okay.
Among these orangutans,
Oh my god. Okay. Jeez.
the knowledge has inspired an astonished reindeer. Careful to keep the baby dry, the mother leaves the jungle to visit an old research post. This is the human world. Treasure trove and quiet. She quietly fills herself. A loss.
So,
She carries her light in her muddy out to the forest. And joins a friend. They appear to use the silk just as we would. Around 40 years ago, rescued orangutans released here learned to use soap by watching local people washing the river. But remarkably, these orangutans were born in the wild, so the idea has spread among the wild population. The shearing of the soap suggests how new orangutans may have learned the technique. It's become a form of animal culture, passed on to the young, something only seen among a few intelligent species. Why they are so keen to lather up is intriguing and not completely understood.
okay, so there's an example of this behavior that went through cultural transmission, right? So this behavior spread among orangutans. But it fits a lot of definitions of tool use, right? There's intent, there's an outside object, they're trying to accomplish a goal, right? But you wouldn't really think of using soap as tool use, right? So it's an interesting example to keep in mind. Okay, this is an example that is included in the textbook as well, with dolphins. Too many videos, I guess. It's upset. Okay.
This female is one of the many in the Shark Bay population that has found a crafty way to protect her sensitive rostrum, the soft, fleshy top of her snout, from the jagged, rough corals she contacts when searching the seabed for food. Her solution? A sponge. Later, in 1989, Janet noticed Hapgood's daughter, Denny, doing the same thing.
So again, an example of something that has been culturally transmitted in animals. And again, this behavior, by some definitions, would fit tool use, and others would not. And this ends up actually being quite a bit of an issue when researching tool use is this behavior actually using a tool or not? What does tool use actually mean? And hopefully by the end of this lecture you'll have some clarity, but you might have even more questions. But that's how the field is too. Okay. Alright, but generally when we're thinking of tool use, we're kind of thinking of those first example there, right? Taking a tool to, like a stick, right, to get some food. That's generally what we're thinking of when we're thinking of tool use in animals. You might think of like a chimp using a stick to get ants, or a crow using a stick to get worms, right? Those are the most common examples of tool use in the animal kingdom, right? So what do tool-using species have in common? What do all these tool-using species have in common? They have extractive foraging in common. Okay, so that's foraging that requires physically extracting a food source from the environment. Things like fishing for termites with a stick, or removing a mussel, that's spelled wrong. It's not a mussel. A mussel, right? That's extractive foraging. So where you have to, well, just like the name says, right? You have to extract the food from something. There's either, there's a substrate covering the food. So animals that have to engage in extractive foraging are generally more likely to become tool users. So there's an ecological similarity there. Here's some examples. Picture of a chimp getting termites with a stick, and some crows as well, trying to get worms with some sticks they fashioned, some tools they fashioned as well. These are, I think they're called sugar babies. They're also extractive foragers, but they actually have this adaptation to have this really long finger that they use to extract food from trees. So the finger, right here. So they actually tap on the trees They're kind of creepy, right? They tap the trees. Yeah. You should watch videos of them. I'm pretty sure they're called sugar babies. Which they don't look like sugar babies. They tap on the trees, and then they use their really long finger to extract the food. So they don't actually need a tool. They have the adaptation on their hand. Right? But also an extractive forager. Okay. So another example of a tool user, by many definitions many good definitions, are capuchin monkeys. So from the phylogeny, the idea of, excavators, they wouldn't be expected to be tool users, but they are. They are tool users. Okay. Here's a little video. So what's this monkey doing? He's using a rod to grab a nut. It's very dramatic. Animal videos are always dramatic, right? This actually takes a lot of practice. This takes learning. They have to learn this from their parents. They don't just know how to do it. So there's some evidence as well, there's some theories that, for these guys anyway, the fact that they live in a terrestrial habitat is what's important and what makes them tool users. Unlike other monkeys that might live more in the trees, they're on the ground, they're foraging things that have fallen on the ground, hard nuts to crack open. But again, this is the kind of tool use you might not really think of when you're thinking of animals using tools. But taking a rock and cracking it fits a lot of those definitions of tool use as well. Okay. So sometimes, you might have noticed this. You might have already made this connection. Sometimes tools are just objects taken from the environment, right? Like that rock, like the soap. But sometimes animals modify and manufacture tools. And again, some definitions of tool use would say animals have to do this. They have to modify or manufacture their own tools. They have to make them. Okay, so how do animals learn to manufacture tools? How does that happen? Okay. When we look at New Caledonian crows, common example, I'm sure you've heard this before. You've heard people say, oh, crows, they're so smart. They use tools. I'm not here to debate that, but I'll come back to that at the end. Getting ahead of myself. Okay, New Caledonian crows. What do? They modify leaves and sticks to use when extractive foraging, right? So they're modifying a tool, they're creating their own tool. And people hypothesize when trying to figure out, okay, how do the crows know how to do this? Is it kind of an intrinsic behavior that they all just know, or are they learning it? Are they learning it from their peers? So is there social learning happening? So in an experiment, they had two groups of crows raised in the lab under the same conditions, except one group was exposed to demonstrators using tools, and the other was not. Okay. So what ended up happening is that both groups actually used tools. Okay. But the group that didn't have demonstrators took longer to develop those skills. So this shows that there's some aspect of social learning that can help in modifying and creating tools, but it's not necessarily required. right? These guys can learn how to do it on their own without feedback from peers. Okay. So New Caledonian crows don't require exposure to tool use to become tool users. And there are some precursor behaviors there where young crows engage in tool use-like behavior before eating, even when no tools are required to access the food. So this kind of shows that there is a bias towards interacting with tool-like objects in crows. All right, but again, there's still some aspect of social learning happening, right? It's helpful information. So it plays a role. Social learning plays a role in tool use. But in order for an animal to learn socially, two things have to happen. An observer must approach a conspecific using the tool, right? That has to happen. And the other thing is that the demonstrator must tolerate a conspecific watching them. Right? It could be the case that an observer approaches a conspecific using a tool, and the conspecific, again, conspecific is member of your own species. Okay. So then the conspecific watches, but the demonstrator is like, nope, I'm not showing you that. Then the social learning can't happen, right? So these two events must happen for animals to be able to socially learn how to use tools. So there's a social tolerance. You have to tolerate someone watching you use a tool.